Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. My name is Eric Prado, and I'll be your host for today's event, Meeting the Challenges of Global Mobility and Immigration, presented by Envoy Global. First, though, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. This session is being recorded, and we will send you the recording after the presentation concludes. The presentation will last for about 40 minutes, and we will have enough time left over for question and answers. And if you would like to ask a question, please use the question function on the right-hand side of your webinar screen. For those unfamiliar with Envoy, for nearly 20 years, we have been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. We combine expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. We secure work authorization in 150 plus countries. We've grown 30% year over year, and we work with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience we provide. All right, now I would like to introduce everyone to our presenter today, Shelly James. Shelly is a global solutions partner with Envoy Global, and she has more than 20 years of experience managing global employee mobility programs, including her time managing Hewlett-Packard's worldwide rotation and assignment programs. Shelly will present key trends, programmatic models, and anecdotes so you can build the best program for your business and employees. Now, I would like to discuss today's agenda before we turn it over to Shelly. As you see, Shelly will discuss today's talent landscape, global mobility challenges, immigration reform and its impact on global mobility, trends and hot topics, and best practices. Following that, we will end the presentation with a question and answer session. All right, so with that, I would like to turn it over to Shelly.
Thanks, Eric, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a really well-rounded and packed agenda, so we're hoping this information that we bring to you today will be useful, resourceful, and that you'll be able to use it and take it back to add to your programs. Let's talk about the talent landscape and what that means in programs today. So just some general information to start off with. According to Mercer Talent, in 2018, the findings for the top 5 challenges that companies are facing today center around change and speed, working with purpose, permanent flexibility, platform for talent, and digital from the inside out. Now, these challenges aren't new. As a matter of fact, I've been familiar with these challenges for a very long time. It's just now coming to light some of the different ways that we can handle meeting these challenges head on, and I'm hopefully going to give you some tools and resources to use in order to meet these challenges. So there have been discussions with CEOs and what they are most concerned about, CEOs from top companies. The question that was posed was, how concerned are you about the following economic, policy, social, and environmental business threats to your organization's growth and prospects? Interestingly enough, 82% of them were concerned about uncertain economic growth. 80% were concerned about overregulation. 77% were concerned about availability of key skills, and 74% about geopolitical uncertainty. Now, I can definitely guarantee you that that geopolitical uncertainty is what's driving a lot of the folks who are heading up these global mobility and immigration programs to try and make decisions on how they're going to manage their global workforce. It's becoming very difficult because nobody is really understanding what is going on with politics and the immigration reform today. So let's talk about the talent landscape. Although HR professionals are aware of the need for skilled workforce, SHRM did a study, and the problem for developing a strong talent pipeline is not necessarily one that HR professionals can solve on their own. If you remember that old phrase, it takes a village, and in today's corporate environment, both big and small companies, it really does take a partnership across all lines of businesses in order to make sure that you can develop a good communication and policy pipeline. In addition, HR professionals believe recruiting has become even more difficult due to the low number of applicants. And this is quite possibly because people are really nervous about trying to apply for jobs where they're uncertain whether they're going to be provided work permits or not. So we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Let's talk about some global mobility challenges. So 70% of employers say sourcing foreign national employees is extremely or very important to their talent acquisition strategy. Now, this may stem from a number of different reasons. There are client needs that need to be met, there are infrastructure needs that need to be met, and a certain level of skill set that companies are trying to source and find, which is becoming increasingly difficult with the regulation of immigration reform today. Difficulty in implementing a talent strategy. Many businesses see global mobility as a benefit that can help their talent strategies, yet 53% admit to facing challenges when it comes to utilizing relocation programs to entice or evolve and retain talent. I can tell you from personal experience that it is very difficult to convince, especially for a long-term assignment, to convince a resource or an employee to up and move their family for a long period of time to a different country where the spouse may have problems trying to find work in that country. They may have challenges trying to acclimate to the culture. They may have language barriers. So it is a lot of uncertainty when you're trying to do especially long-term assignments. International relocation costs. Now, obviously, this is very important to the infrastructure and the budget. And when you're trying to do forecasting for your global mobility program for the coming year, it makes it very difficult when you don't know what kind of governmental risk or regulation challenges you might be facing. And then there's always the tax challenges too. And those can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost and to the budget every year. Decentralization of the internal programs. Now, I will tell you this was probably one of mine. I was running very large programs for KPMG and Hewlett-Packard. Decentralization, especially having to work with either separate entities, separate business lines and segments across borders in different countries. It's very hard to make sure that you have one policy seat where you're housing all of your policies and practices. And then on top of that, trying to convince your cross-border partners to follow those policies as well, because they have their own country challenges to meet. So decentralization is quite a large problem. Challenges facing global companies. Short-term versus long-term assignments. I did just touch on this just a tad. There are some interesting trends with the short-term versus long-term assignments and why folks are choosing, companies are choosing to go with short-term or even business travel terms over long-term assignments. Whether the assignment is a short-term or long-term assignment, these types of moves prevent a variety of challenges, including things like compliance and tax, immigration, and coordination of cost issues, not to mention the communications with foreign partners in your entities abroad to try and make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. Contractors and self-employed assignees. The rise of contract workers who go from project to project for multiple employers is part of the future work, according to Mercer. Now, although that might be very popular, it does pose a number of challenges. The implications of the new way for working for global mobility models are quite profound, and you have to be prepared while running a program like that you need to be very agile and move very quickly and be very flexible in moving your resources cross-border. Let's talk about immigration reform and its impact specifically on global mobility. So, recent government statements and actions suggesting a harder line on immigration have many companies running for the hills. They're very concerned about what they're going to do as far as making sure they're compliant, first and foremost, but also managing their resources and ensuring that their people talent are, focusing on their jobs instead of having to focus on whether or not they're going to be able to stay in the country from day to day, right? So it's becoming increasingly important for global mobility professionals and immigration professionals to be very wise about how they're managing their folks and keeping up on the day-to-day changing immigration and global mobility environment. The ability for global talent to travel openly for business will most definitely be challenged, and making sure that your folks stay safe and compliant and agile in order to meet client needs is going to become imperative. One of the biggest issues that global mobility companies face with the immigration reform is the potential of disruption for their assignees already in the U.S., not just necessarily those they're trying to bring in from other companies, but those who have been in the U.S. for a number of years and have filed extensions and don't know whether they're going to have that H-1B or L-1 extension approved, from filing to filing. So it's making employees very nervous, and on top of that, it's making the global mobility and immigration program managers nervous because they're not sure how to communicate to the line managers and your segment leaders on how to negate that. So it's always important to stay up on those types of compliance issues. Let's talk about employers who are experiencing challenges within the immigration system. So I've got some percentages here, and in the coming slides, we'll break those percentages down. 25% of employers had to increase their budgets. 26% of employers are engaged in advocacy efforts. 26% had to delay projects. 28% had to increase staff, and 22% are relocating work overseas. Now, these may seem to be some staggering percentages, but I will tell you a little bit of backstory as to why employers are becoming so concerned about compensating for these different areas. Employers who are having to increase budgets are doing so in order to make sure that they can accommodate for any unforeseen governmental fees that come their way, unforeseen filings, unforeseen family situations where they may need to, the spouse loses their job and they're having to file family petitions in order to make sure folks stay in the U.S. Those folks that are engaging in advocacy efforts, I will say that this is probably a really important piece of being a very well-rounded global mobility or immigration professional. I myself have been engaged in advocacy efforts in a number of different facets and ways over the years, and it's become invaluable. Not to mention that I've created a really great network, but it's become invaluable to me in order to make sure I can stay up on the changing regulations and compliance needs. Delaying projects, that's an interesting percentage, and having to delay projects is never a really good conversation to have with your clients. Doing that extra preparation and taking the extra steps to make sure that your resources that you're putting on the ground for those clients can remain there, and you have a long-term strategy in place, that is part of the reason why these projects are being delayed, and it is costing companies money. And then increasing staff, and that's just mainly due to all of the newer regulations that are coming out that are having to ensure that extra paperwork is done, extra filing is done, extra steps are being taken by companies to make sure that you're compliant. All those things add up to extra headcount, which may or may not be a good thing, but it is a necessary evil sometimes. So let's talk about trends and hot topics. So according to GMS in 2018, global relocation trends include growth in partner and spouse career support programs, flexible and responsible global relocation programs, technology advances, and then outsourcing relocation programs to industry experts. We're going to break these bullet points down here over the next few slides, but I will tell you each one of these summary bullets are very, very important to a good, successful global mobility or immigration program. So we'll talk about the first bullet, growth and in partner and spouse career support programs. Probably, at least in my experience, probably the number one reason that a mid to long-term assignment fails in a foreign country is because the spouse could not acclimate, and either they couldn't acclimate to the culture, or they missed their support structure from the U.S., or they could not find suitable work in the country where the employee was being transferred to or was being assigned to. This is really, really a people issue, and one that if you're not taking it seriously now, you really should look into try and develop out those support programs for spouses, especially if you're sending a lot of folks on long-term assignments. It's very important that you have career structure, support structure, culture aspects in place in order to make sure that assignment, that long-term assignment, will be successful when you repatriate that person back to the U.S. Talking about flexible and responsive global relocation programs, it's always going to be important for a multinational client to have designed a corporate level relocation program, which then is further customized so each international headquarter location can be on board. This goes back to that whole decentralization notion, where you need to have one, regular policy seat where you can draw each policy, program, best practice from, so that you can disseminate that throughout your entire organization, both in the U.S. and abroad. Technology advances. Global relocation programs continue to respond to evolving technology changes. So increasingly, mobile technology must be responsive to provide transferees with information and solutions during their relocation assignment program. This is interesting because over the last few years, a great deal of advancement has taken place with mobile apps, and I will tell you, Envoy has a really great business model that includes up to the second access to their case management, which includes mobile apps where they can get on their phone and submit documents, or they can get on their phone and check the status of their application, whatever the case may be. It's really imperative that you have that technology at their fingertips so that they can access it anytime they need to. Outsourcing to industry experts. Again, this stems from the ambiguity for corporations and both big and small companies not knowing what's coming in the immigration or global mobility environment. So outsourcing to experts is going to become imperative. And there are a number of different advantages to outsourcing to the industry experts. It takes the day-to-day burden off of your plate as program managers and allows you to focus on strategy-based practices for your company, communication plans for your business lines, so that you don't have to get in the weeds with the day-to-day that's going on. And at the same time, you have access to the information that you need in order to forecast and run your program successfully. Best practices and tips. So how can companies stay and navigate these challenges? Shifting mobility from operational to strategic. So we just talked a little bit about going from switching from the day-to-day into the strategic, which you as program managers, it allows you to focus on what's most important, focus on people strategies, focus on your program strategies and policies, instead of having to focus on individual cases or put out fires. I can tell you in my day, I put out so many fires and got bogged down with things that you start off in the morning having a really good plan about what you're going to do, and then all of a sudden the phone rings or the email blows up and you're putting out fires all day, and it's 5 o'clock and now you can't focus on any strategic plan. So talent mobility is becoming a key aspect of realizing organization objectives. So you want to make sure you can focus on high-level strategic aspects instead of being in the weeds. Work alongside key stakeholders, both in home and host locations. It will help you design policies and practices, and then you can maximize your mobility program's strategic impact by partnering with the folks in the countries where you need to make the most impact. And then, of course, communicate your mobility program details internally. This is key. Your communication plan needs to be as strong as you can possibly make it. The only way that you're going to be able to educate and remain compliant with your line managers and your segment leaders is to make sure that you have a very good, strong line of communication that you're operating within. Have webinars, hold lunch and learns, get yourself invited to the seat at the table with your C-suite if you're able to do that. It's very, very important to make sure that all of your executives, all of your mid managers know exactly what to expect when it comes to your immigration challenges. I guarantee you, if you have a good communication plan in place and you're feeding information to the pipeline into your HR, your recruiting, your executives, your line managers, and your segment leaders, it'll make your job 120% easier. Let's talk about how companies can navigate challenges with using data to your advantage. I shared with you earlier how decentralization was a key component for me in order to, a key challenge in order for me to stay afloat and make sure that we were running a really good, tight program. The second challenge that I think is most important is having very good data analytics. Mobility analytics can provide organizations with critical insights for making transformative, not just informational, but transformative decisions. It is very, very challenging, I know, in the environment today to be able to pull information at your fingertips. It used to take me anywhere from, a few days working with my immigration vendors, anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, depending on how complex the information was that I needed to put together. To pull that information, organize it, and then communicate it and share it with my line managers and my segment leaders, my HR folks, and my recruiters. It was very challenging because there wasn't a good way to have all of that data right at your fingertips. I will tell you that Envoy Global, with their technology, has one of the best ways of doing this that I've ever seen. So you have real-time access to data. You can pull together a very complex forecasting or budgeting report or compliance report in a matter of minutes instead of days or weeks. So I will, I know we're probably a little bit ahead of time, but I think we've come to the part of our presentation where we can take some questions. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for the great presentation, Shelly. And we do have some time left over for questions. Before we get into that, though, I just want to remind everyone that if you would like to ask a question, please do so using the GoToWebinar panel that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And we already have had a few questions coming in, so let's get into it. All right, Shelly, first question. What are companies doing to ensure their employees are travel ready when necessary?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That's a very good question. So it goes back to being prepared ahead of time for meeting challenges for whatever the government may throw at you. So having good data analytics at your fingertips allows you to review casework, see, in bulks of time who's coming up for extension, who needs to really get ready to make that jump from a temporary immigrant to a permanent immigrant, so that you can have time to formulate a strategy for each individual employee. That way, if you do run into an instance where you have a client need, an urgent client need where they need 10 resources on the ground, you can easily pick through and have folks that are already travel ready and can, get that visa or that business status and travel to that country and hit the ground running without having to worry about their immigration needs and not being travel ready. I hope that answers your question.
That sounds like hopefully. Let's see. All right, here's another one. You mentioned analytics in your previous in the answer you just gave, so kind of piggybacking off of that. How important is having good data?
So I will tell you that I would probably rank that as the top one or two most important things that you can have in your toolbox as a global mobility or immigration professional. It makes your job so much easier when you can pull data, real-time data, so that you can do forecasting, you can do budgeting, you can see what your immigration costs are, both big picture as well as individual caseload studies. You can, if you have data that you can pull so that you can do year over year or even 3 to 5 year cost analysis, it becomes invaluable when you're trying to communicate that information to your leadership and to your executives who are really wanting to know how they're going to move their talent strategy forward, and what challenges might come up with respect to immigration costs and to global mobility costs. And that includes having information readily available for, the foreign country costs that people may not think of, like tax and certifications, apostilles, things like that you wouldn't necessarily know about without having good data analytics in front of you. I hope that answered your question.
Totally, yeah, good. Let's see. As a reminder, the recording and the slide deck will be sent out to everyone who registered for the webinar. It'll be sent out in the coming days, so please keep an eye out on your inbox for those two items. Shelly, we got another question that came in. All right. You mentioned career support systems for spouses when their partners are called to transfer to other countries. What kinds of trends are you seeing with respect to length of assignment?
That's a very good question. Thank you. This is really a basic driver as to why we've seen long-term assignments kind of go by the wayside. There isn't a good structure in place to have that spouse acclimate well to the foreign culture. Not a whole lot of ability to find careers for the spouse or the family. So the decisions are being made not, by the employees, by the way. Their decisions are being driven by, taking shorter term assignments, or even really short term business trips, so that they can not necessarily have the need to take their family with them, but come back to them, at a shorter period of time, and do that multiple times over within a course of the year, so they don't have to worry about making the major life-changing move into a country where they're having to worry about their spouse acclimating to that culture and finding a career opportunity. I hope that answered your question.
Totally. Let's see what else we got coming in here. What are some early steps my company can take to implement a talent strategy?
So that's a very good question, and I'm going to answer that question in two parts. So if you have a smaller company, probably, folks are wearing multiple hats and having to do, talent strategy, recruiting, onboarding, maybe a little of immigration and global mobility mixed in there, right? So, and some HR. So if you're trying to really mobilize a good, strong talent strategy in a company who may have some of those organizations tied up into one or two or even three people, then I would really recommend having a good, strong playbook that you can reference, that goes through onboarding, goes through recruitment, includes immigration strategies and policies, includes global mobility policies, so that you can reference that and you can share that with your leadership and your executives. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're a very large organization and you have a very sophisticated program, then again, a good, strong program management system that includes best practices that have worked over the years, strategies that you can include to ensure that everything is in its proper place. That way it's easier to communicate to your line managers, to your HR folks, to your executives, to your segment leaders, so that they understand what your place is in the overall talent strategy. that usually works in both scenarios, both for a small organization as well as a large, sophisticated organization. I hope that answered your question.
Yep. All right. Well, Shelly, I think that's all the time. Those are all the time we have for questions today. So with that, Shelly, big thank you for joining us on today's presentation. If anyone does have a question, it looks like we got another one that just came in. Let me. Here, Shelly, here's one that I think you might be able to tackle. It just came in as I was about to sign off. What is Mercer Table, and how does this person subscribe to it for getting the cost of living differentials in different countries?
Wow. Okay, that's a good question. So Mercer's a survey that HR professionals and immigration professionals, talent management professionals, they can tap into to receive very good, strong, sort of best practices and global trends that are going on right now. They do these types of surveys all the time. They're on various topics. And my apologies, I don't exactly know how to get to them, although if you will allow, I can find out for you and share that information with Eric, and we can get that information out to you.
Sounds like a plan. All right, so we'll end the presentation with that question. If you did have a question and would like to ask it directly to Shelly, you can email her at shelly.james@envoyglobal.com. All right, Shelly, a big thanks for joining us today, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.